Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for today's Music Top 10 episode, which is Top 10 Albums That Have Grown on Me. This video, preparing for it, was actually a little bit of a process. Originally, it had a different title. It was going to be called Top 10 Albums That I Thought I Didn't Like, but then I changed it to Top 10 Albums That Have Grown on Me, just to simplify it. But then, when I was thinking about the two titles that I had there, I realized that both of them mean different things. Top 10 albums that I thought I didn't like means I've done a complete 360 on my thoughts of the album, compared to albums that, I initially did like, but, just over time I've grown more of a love for. So that's what I'll be covering in today's video, and I'll still do top 10 albums that I thought I didn't like sometime down the track, but I thought it would be easier to start with the more simple list, I guess, being top 10 albums that have grown on me. So yeah, this was still a fun one to do. One thing that I thought I would restrict my list to is albums that I do own in my collection. There were plenty of albums that I don't own in my collection but have grown on me so much over time. Like, a major one that came to mind when I thought of this list, and I guess it will be an honourable mention, is the album Red, Green or In Between by the band Waster. That album has grown on me so much over time, but I wanted to restrict it to albums that I purely had in my collection, because if you've heard me talk about my music before on this channel or on socials or whatever, you guys would know that majority of what I listen to through my day-to-day life is what is in my collection. When I'm at home, I'll put on a CD. When I'm out, I listen to what I've downloaded from disc onto my phone. I'm old school like that. But yeah, I wanted to stay true to like what I'm actually listening to from day to day, to show that it has grown on me more than just like a flip of a switch with something that I don't honestly always come back to because I don't own it in my collection. That's a quick little thing that I wanted to put out there. But otherwise, this top 10 is purely just ranked on how much the album has changed on me over time, how much it's grown on me. So my number 1 has grown on me the most compared to my number 10, where it still has grown on me. Obviously, it's the top 10, but just not as much. But I'm sure you guys get the gist for this video. I don't want to do too long of an intro, so let's get into it. My top 10 albums that I own in my collection that have grown on me. Starting off my list, coming in at my number 10 is the self-titled State Champs album, titled State Champs, obviously. This is an album only from last year, so a relatively new album. But man, this album actually really did grow on me in such a short amount of time. So a lot of people are really surprised with me being a massive pop-punk fan. Like, pop-punk is my favourite subgenre of music, that I'm not crazy about State Champs as a band. Like, before this album, my favourite album by the band, and really the only album that I genuinely care for by them, was Around the World and Back. The rest of their other albums have moments that I do enjoy, but in general, overall, nothing I overly gravitate towards. When this album came out, it was one that grabbed me with its consistency, and I was like, okay, there's a lot more on this album that I am getting out of it compared to albums from their past. So I was enjoying it for that, and I was like, you know what, I would like to add this one to my collection. I enjoyed listening to it through the year, pretty good. But the more that I've listened to it from last year to now, I'm like, this album is actually genuinely really solid from start to finish. Like, the start has the more well-known songs. The first half is pretty much like the singles and everything. But even as it gets towards the back catalogue, I'm like, there is a lot of really good, strong songs here, a lot of consistency. And it's probably an album that I gave it a little less credit for than what it was due, So coming in at my number 10 is the self-titled State Champs album, State Champs. Coming in at my number 9 spot is the album The Jaws of Life by the band Perseveral. Now, I think initially when this album came out, the thing that stopped it from growing on me right from the start was sort of my own expectations with this album. Now, I knew when this album was coming out that it was going to sound different and try new things compared to earlier albums, and I didn't have a problem with that at all. I was actually really excited for that. But I think my expectations were different to what we ended up getting. Now, from the singles and word of mouth and everything, I thought this album was going to be a lot more grunge. You know, I think there are still grunge elements off this album. One of the singles that sort of alluded a lot of people to this album being grunge was Past the Nirvana, and it's such a great song and a great example, but I thought a lot more of the album was going to feel like that. But what we got from this album was, as I said, still small moments of grunge. We got experimental stuff. We got stuff that sounds like early Pierce the Veil that wasn't too, out of the blue. But as I said, when this album was coming out, I had such a clear picture of kind of what I wanted it to be, I guess, with this direction that, a lot of people were sort of hinting that this album was going to be. So at first, I guess for lack of a better term, I was a little bit disappointed by this album. I still really enjoyed it. It was one of my favourite albums from the year it came out. But it took time to do that. At first I was just kind of like, okay. But the more I let this album sit with me and, I listened to it over and over, I was like, you know what? Maybe it wasn't what I expected, but it's still a really cool album. It's an impressive album. Maybe it's not one of the band's overall best, but it's a solid output, and it's one that now, knowing what this album sounds like with all different kinds of sounds, is one that I can lock into, and find enjoyment from with, the different sounds that it gives you. So coming in at my number 9 is The Jaws of Life by the band Pierce the Veil. Coming in at my number 8 spot is the album Daisy Chain by the band Slowly Slowly. Now this might surprise a lot of people because whenever I bring up the band Slowly Slowly, I'm always hyping up Daisy Chain. I'm always saying that Daisy Chain is their crown achievement. It's such a strong album, and I think that speaks volumes because I'm always just giving the band praise in general, but when I'm putting the shining light on one album in particular, it's always this one. Like, shit, I've got a tattoo on my elbow now inspired from this album. Like, that's how much this album has grown on me. But initially, I wasn't even a massive fan of the band in general, let alone this album. But my brother was a big Slowly Slowly fan and still is. And when this album came out back in 2022, he was talking about it, how he wanted to pick up a copy when it came out and whatever. And I was in a different state at the time, and I picked it up for his birthday. And while I was away, I had this album with me, and I'm like, you know what, I should give it a spin, give it a listen, see what it's all about, what the hype is and everything. And I heard a couple of their albums and songs beforehand, but nothing overly grabbed me. But when I listened to this album, I'm like, you know what, it's pretty good. I still wasn't quite in love, but I'm like, you know what, I am getting something out of this album. This is something that I can see myself coming back to and, listening to more and learning from and whatever. But like I've said, just over time, this album has grabbed me in a chokehold pretty much. Like I said, before this album, Slowly Slowly were a band that were kind of lukewarm on me, but now they're one of my favourite bands just in general. Like, I love them. I've gone back and checked out their earlier stuff. They've done an album since this one, but to me, this is still their shining light. I just love this album, adore it. I think it's so, so cool. And obviously, like I said, it's grown on me so much that I've had to put it in my skin. So coming in at number 8 is the album Daisy Chain by the band Slowly Slowly. Coming in on my number 7 is the album Entertainment by the band Waterparks. Now, you could say that this was one of a handful of albums that inspired me to do this top 10 list, top 10 albums that have grown on me, because this is kind of a prime example. A lot of early Waterparks I was a fan of. Their first 3 studio albums are albums that I would say I enjoy, but this is the one that sort of stood out as being just sort of scraping through. I got something from it, but I never could really make a strong case for this being a solid enough album where I'm like, oh no, it's up there with some of their better stuff, But eventually I got to a point where I'm like, I want to pick it up. I already own Double Dare, I already own Fandom, and I'm like, you know what, I might as well pull the one of those first 3 albums from their discography. I might as well pull the trigger on picking up Entertainment. And it wasn't until I picked it up and gave it, more listens, because as I said in the intro, the albums that I own in my collection I just tend to listen to more. I was like, you know what, this album actually is pretty good. I'm not saying that it's up there with Double Dare and Fandom. I think those 2 albums are on a whole other level. but I think this album is a lot better than for a long time I was giving it credit for. So like I said, this was like a prime example of one of the albums that came to mind when I first thought of this list, or vice versa. This is sort of one that inspired me to do this list. But I think it is a really cool album. Like I said, I sort of put it on the back burner for a pretty long time, but here we are with Entertainment by the band Waterparks. Coming in at my number 6 is the album Everything Is Temporary by the band Between You and Me. Now, if you've heard me talk about the band Between You and Me before, you guys know I have a lot of love for them. A really cool modern pop punk band from Australia, actually from Melbourne, so very close to me. I've seen them live a handful of times. Really good live performance, live act. I'm pretty sure they're broken up now or on hiatus or something, I'm not too sure. But they've only ever done 2 albums, and if you've heard me talk about their albums before on this channel, more than likely you've heard me talk about their follow-up sophomore album being Armageddon. And I still think Armageddon is the better of the 2 albums. I really do love that album. But in comparison, talking about Everything Is Temporary, I almost gave this album a little bit too much, like, kind of shade in a way for a long time. I would often say something like, this album is a little bit too safe, run-of-the-mill, generic pop punk, and in a way it still is. But this album's grown on me on, like, a more personal level, as in, now that the band has broken up, or even before that, just a band that, like I said, is close to me, being Melbourne, Australia, and I've seen them live a handful of times. I've seen them, like, right from their birth to eventually their end. They might be coming back, I don't know, but I'll get off that topic. Just going back to sort of where it started, as I said, this was their first full-length album. I like it because of its simplicity, because of its origins, because of its nostalgia, because of its blueprints to what the band had become. I've just grown so much more appreciation for this album than anything, and I think that's how it's grown on me, just through pure appreciation. And even when I wasn't giving this album the love and flowers that I'm giving it now, I still thought it was a cool album and one that I got enjoyment from. If I had to put a list of like top 20 modern pop punk albums together, to be honest, it probably wouldn't make that list. But for me, it's an album where I'm like, okay, this song was the blueprint to this song that they did on the next album, or that sound that they have on this new album, it came from this song here. And there's a lot of songs off this album that I have nostalgia with, Dakota and Friends from 96 and stuff like that. So this album has grown on me, sort of in that aspect, so it definitely earned a spot on this list. So coming in at my number 6 is Everything Is Temporary by the band Between You and Me. Coming in at my number 5 spot, I have the album Yours to Keep by the band Sticky Fingers. Now, very similar to Slowly Slowly, this was a band that my brother was really into. I was somewhat familiar with them, some of their previous albums I had listened to, but, I couldn't really remember the songs off by heart and whatever. And a lot of their earlier sounding stuff just wasn't quite up my alley. They had some okay songs throughout earlier albums, but nothing that really grabbed me. What I knew about this album was there were particular songs that were more so up my alley. It had a little bit more of a polished sound for sure, but a little bit more of also a rock influence in there, and I don't know how to describe it. It is a little bit different to their earlier stuff. If you're familiar with the band, I'm sure you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pick up this album. It's one that, I enjoy more than their earlier stuff. And even when I first picked it up, it didn't set my world on fire. But once upon a time, and I say that because I can't even remember how long ago it was, or a particular time or date or situation, I just went, you know what, I'm going to listen to this album in full and give it another chance and whatever. And I was like, whoa, this album is not just good and passable like I thought it was. This album is great. This album is really fucking good. I was so surprised by how solid this album was from start to finish. I remember when this situation happened, I ended up listening to this album for a week straight on rotation, 7 days of the week, almost 3 times a day. I'm like, this album is really fucking cool. And it is a cool album. Listen to it. It's just got so many groovy songs, but then some like hard hitting shit as well, for Sticky Fingers standards. I think this is an album that I slept on. A lot of people sleep on. You know, even when I hear people who are more so fans of Sticky Fingers, this isn't an album I often hear them gravitate towards. But I highly recommend checking this one out. It's really, really cool. Like I said, grew on me like crazy. So coming in at my number 5 is the album Yours to Keep by the band Sticky Fingers. Coming in at my number 4 spot is the album Misery by the band The Amity Affliction. Now, this is an album I'm actually really excited to be talking about. And I don't mean I wasn't excited to talk about any of the other albums on this list, but in particular, I was just like really excited to talk about this one just from a purely like therapeutic kind of way, because honestly, when this album came out, I kind of felt like I was picking it up for the sake of picking it up, as in The Amity Affliction was and still is one of my all-time favourite Australian bands, one of my all-time favourite heavier bands, you know, within that style and scene and genre and what have you. And this album just sort of felt a little bit not what I was expecting. And, you know, to be fair, it's definitely their most experimental album. There's a lot of things that they're doing different compared to their earlier sound and whatever. And I just wasn't sure if I was fully on board, but I wanted to be there to support it. With that being said, I didn't hate this album or anything, but it just wasn't what I was expecting it to be. And like I said, to be transparent, I kind of felt like I was just picking it up for the sake of picking it up. And a lot of people say that this is sort of where the Amity Affliction have gone down since. You know, a lot of people really didn't like this album. But the thing that makes me sort of realize how much I really do like this album is how much I find myself defending it. Now, with that being said, I still don't think it's anything mind-blowing. I really do like this album. There's a lot of enjoyment that I get from it, and it genuinely has grown on me from more than just a defending it standpoint. But a lot of people are like, you know, it's too different, and this has really been the downfall of the band and whatever. But I find myself like giving them recommendations, you know, deeper cuts off the album to go and check out. I find myself, you know, making the argument that yes, it's experimental, but at least they're trying something different. Like, I really do always pull out my sword and shield whenever I'm talking about this album with someone. And I think that's a sign of an album that has grown on me from something where, like I said, I really did feel like I was sort of picking it up just for the sake of picking it up, to now an album that I'm really happy is in my collection, and honestly I do come back to every now and then. So coming in at my number 4 spot is the album Misery by the band The Amity Affliction. Coming in at my number 3 spot is the album Hello It's You by the band Bearings. Now, initially when this album came out, I did enjoy it, but I sort of had a gripe with this album. I sort of felt like it was maybe a little bit of a letdown or disappointing, and the reason why I found it to be that was because I think I was comparing it a lot to their first album, Blue in the Dark. And the thing about Blue in the Dark, if you've heard me talk about it before on my channel, which you probably have, is that that album has a lot of consistency for me. Like, I feel like the weaker songs off that album are like mediocre or average at worst. Like, it just has so much consistency, especially for a debut album. It really is impressive. So when this one came out, there were songs that were weak, and I was like, okay, straight away, there's just not as strong of a consistency off this album. And I sort of let that be the monkey on the back for this album for the longest time. But I've kind of had that much of a change of heart. I'm starting to think that this might actually be my favourite Bearings album now. Yes, Blue in the Dark has more consistency, but I feel like when you get to the highs off this album, they are so fucking high and really good. You have songs like Sway, Better Yesterday, Trends and Colours. Like, there are so many like really high songs on here that I think are some of the best in the band's discography. So yes, the lows do go lower than Blue in the Dark, but I shouldn't really be thinking like that, you know. I think I was just a little bit disappointed by the lack of consistency comparing it to the first, but growing up and maturing and listening to this album more and letting it grow on me over time, I really have had a flip of opinions. And like I said, I think this could be my favourite album by the band now. You know, maybe less consistency, but when the highs are there, it really is banging and a really solid album. So coming in at my number 3 spot is the album Hello It's You by the band Bearings. Coming in at my number 2 is the album Double Dare by the band Waterparks. So Waterparks have had 2 appearances on this list, so you could say that they have been the band that have grown on me the most over time, I guess, if you want to look at it like that. But this is an interesting one to talk about because if you were paying attention when I was talking about their previous album that was on this list, Entertainment, you would have heard me comparing it to this album being Double Dare and their other early album being Fandom, and I was talking about how Entertainment just wasn't on the same level as these two for a very long time. So I guess I should fill that gap, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a story time with my history and Waterpark's first 3 albums in particular. So Double Dare was the first of their full-length albums, and when this album came out, I liked it. I didn't love it, I didn't think it was anything crazy, but I did enjoy it. When Entertainment came out, I liked it a little bit less, still enough to where I was like, okay, I guess eventually I will pick it up, but it still didn't blow me away. When Fandom came out, the third of their first 3 albums, it fucking rocked my world. It blew my fucking shitter out. Like, I loved Fandom. I thought it was so fucking cool. I rushed to pick up that album as soon as I could. Did. I still love that album to this day. I think it's great. And then I was like, okay, I'll follow it up with the next best, which was Double Dare. And like I said, I liked this album when it came out. I didn't love it. But the more I listened to this album over time, almost like my previously mentioned Bearings album, I think this album has the potential for being my new favourite Waterparks album. At the moment, I'll say that it's not because I just like Fandom that much. I really connect to the writing and the messaging on that album. It's something that has just stuck with me through a longer period of time. But I think just the more I listen to this album, it honestly does have a chance of taking out that number 1 spot. And I honestly feel a little bit late to the chase because I remember when this album came out, it made fucking waves, dude. Everyone was talking about this album. And even though I really did like it, I just wasn't quite getting the hype. But since picking it up, as I said, almost from the sake of just being like, oh, Phantom's so good, I should pick up Double Dare because that was the next best, and, you know, I can just chuck it in the rotation with Fandom. But this album's just been picking off others and shooting up my favourites list. Like, I really do love Double Dare. It's grown on me a shit ton. Like I said, Entertainment's grown on me, you know, enough. Just double that, and that's what that's what Double Dare's been. So coming in on my number 2 spot is Double Dare by the band Waterparks. And coming in at my number 1, the album that has grown on me the most out of anything in my collection, just off the top of my head at least, here we have the album Toxic by the band Yours Truly. Now, like my previously mentioned State Champ's self-titled album that was number 10 on my list, this is also an album that only came out last year, so it's done a lot of growing on me in such a short amount of time, but I'd say even shorter. This album, from its release to the end of last year, did so much growing on me. Now, I can't remember the exact month that it came out in 2024, but by the end of 2024, let's just say maybe a 6-month period, this one did like almost a full 360 in my head. So when this album first came out, I knew of Yours Truly. I wasn't massive on them. I actually had seen them a couple of times live, opening for other bands, and I'd listened to their stuff, and I was like, yeah, you know what, it's okay, just maybe not quite for me, maybe needs a little bit more time to brew. But after I saw that they had a new album coming out, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a go. And upon the first couple of listens to it, I was like, you know what, it's okay, it has room to grow, there's some cool songs towards the back, but, you know, I'll pick it up, give it a few more listens, see what happens. There's some really cool albums that are coming out in 2024, so maybe won't be at the top of the list. You know, I had all those sort of thoughts. When I was preparing for my favourite albums of the year list for 2024, like I do at the end of every year, I'm like, you know what, gotta go back and check out Yours Truly. I'm sure it'll be somewhere towards the back, bottom, maybe middle at best. Going back to listen to this album, like, my jaw dropped. I was like, am I listening to the fucking same thing that I listened to the first couple of times? Because, like, my brain just could not compute. I'm like, I love this. Like, as I said, it wasn't even like a gradual build. I'm like, is this the same album I was listening to? This is fucking great. Like, I remember there being some strong songs towards the back. You know, the 2 songs that come to mind is Sinking and Desaturated. But I'm like, this album, like, from start to finish is, like, so fucking good. As I said, I've, like, almost, like, completely changed my mind on this album. Even though I initially liked it from the start. Like, I love this album. I'm going to go so far to say that this is one of my favourite female-led albums of all time. Like, not even of just like last year, of the last decade, like of all time. Yours truly are a female-led band, female-fronted to be exact, from Australia. So again, giving Australia some love here. But this album just like has blown me away and been on like a really constant rotation since. But yeah, this has been a fun one to grow on me. I'm so happy that it grew on me, and it's even given me like more hope to go back and check out earlier Yours Truly, which to be honest I haven't really done much yet, probably because this one's been stuck on rotation in my head over and over and over, and I'm like, oh, I want to go to something that I know I enjoy, but I should go back and check out their earlier stuff. So coming in at my number 1 is Toxic by the band Yours Truly. So there we go, guys, through my top 10 list of albums that have grown on me. As usual, I'll do a quick little recap before we wrap up this video, even though I'm sure no one's watching by this point. Let me know in the comments if you are still watching or you consistently watch to the end of my videos. But for the recap, coming in at number 10 was State Champ's self-titled album. Coming in at my number 9 was The Jaws of Life by Pierce Vale. Coming in at my number 8 was Slowly Slowly's Daisy Chain album. It's crazy that this album is from 2022, and like I said, this is the album that sort of got me into this band. It's embarrassing that that was only 3 years ago, like fucking hell. At my number 7, I have Entertainment by the band Waterparks. My number 6, I have Everything Is Temporary by Between You and Me. My number 5, Yours to Keep by Sticky Fingers. Number 4, I have Misery by The Amity Affliction. Number 3 is Hello It's You by the band Bearings. Number 2 goes to Double Dare by Waterparks. And number 1, also the album that I guess, like I said, had the shortest amount of time to grow on me and like pulled it off masterfully, is Toxic by the band Yours Truly. So there we go, guys. If you've heard any of those albums, let me know your thoughts of them in the comments below, or just in general, maybe some albums that you always liked, but just over time has grown on you more and more. And like I said, eventually I will do a video that was initially going to be this one. Like I said, this video was going to be titled Top 10 Albums I Thought I Didn't Like, and that video will come, and in that video I'll do albums that, you know, I listen to and I'm like, I don't want to, you know, pick them up at all. Like, I'm not a fan of this album, you know, and just by circumstance or whatever's happened in life, I've ended up listening to it again and being like, fuck, I actually do like this album. And yeah, I think like that is the more drastic version of this list. These are all albums where I picked them up and I did have a love for them or an appreciation for them, and I'm like, I will listen to that again. So this is like that video, but a light version of it. The next one's going to be complete 360s albums where I'm like, I have no care to pick it up at all, to this is now one that I love to have in my collection. So I don't know when that video will come out, but I'll make sure that I eventually do it sometime in the future. But thank you for joining me for today's video. I don't want it to go too long, and I'll see you for another video soon, guys. Peace.